Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where beauty isn't just admired, it's weaponized, where the smooth curve of a wrist can change the course of dynasties, and your smile might be your greatest danger. You're not heading to a royal ball or a romance novel fantasy. No, tonight. You're walking into a system that has chewed up thousands of hopeful brides and swallowed them whole, all for the sake of empire. The gowns are heavy, the makeup is heavier, and the weight of your family's expectations? Well, that might be the heaviest of all. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into a well-off family, but not so powerful that you're untouchable. Just enough status to be eligible. Just enough visibility to be summoned. And that's what happens. One spring morning, a scroll arrives. The emperor is seeking a bride. Not just any bride, a woman fit to become the mother of the realm. You're old enough to understand that this means your life is no longer your own. Your mother presses her lips into a thin line and begins listing the herbs for skin lightening. Your father begins updating your family's genealogy scroll, tracing illustrious ancestors like a merchant displaying rare goods. See, for most emperors in dynastic China, marriage wasn't about affection, it was about stability, political alliance, the production of sons with the right blood. The first empress of the Tang dynasty, for instance, was chosen partly because her father had supported the founding emperor militarily, and partly because her horoscope was considered exceptionally lucky. You, meanwhile, have no idea what your stars say, but you're suddenly getting a lot of tea poured into cups shaped like phoenix eggs. The criteria? They're brutal. You need to be fertile looking, whatever that means to an old eunuch with a clipboard. Quiet, graceful, symmetrical in the face. And from a family that won't stage a coup at the first opportunity. If you're missing any of these qualifications, well, better hope your dowry makes up for it. And the first test? Public rumor. The market vendors already know. Did you hear? They whisper. Minister Lin's daughter is going to the palace. The tall one. She has eyes like almonds. You walk through the street, and they look at you as if you're already wearing the empress's crown, or already dead. Back home, preparations begin. Your hair is oiled and combed for hours. You're not allowed in the sun. Every mole on your face is scrutinized. Your feet, already bound, are measured again. They must not exceed the golden lotus's standard, even if that means pain sharp enough to blur your vision. Historians still argue whether this selection process was more political theater or genuine matchmaking. Some say the emperor never even saw most of the candidates. That the empress dowager or head eunuch made the final call. Others claim the emperor liked to wander the viewing courts in disguise, judging you not just by your looks, but by how you treated a servant who dropped your tea. You don't know which version is true. You only know you're being watched. You're led to a quiet chamber for your first posture assessment. Yes, posture. You kneel on a stone slab while a panel of ladies from the palace nod or frown, depending on whether your back slouches. Then they make you walk across rice paper to judge the lightness of your step. You've spent years practicing this, and still, your foot catches the edge of your silk robe. Someone writes something down. You don't ask what. One girl next to you whispers that her aunt was once chosen and died in childbirth before she turned 20. Another girl says her mother bribed an astrologer to fudge her daughter's birth year so her zodiac would match the emperor's. You look around and realize everyone here is pretending this is an honor, but most of them are praying to lose. And yet, you can't help hoping. Just a little. Maybe he'll be kind. Maybe he'll look into your eyes and see you, not your surname. That hope is dangerous. You shove it aside. Later that evening, your maid brings you a bowl of swan broth and tells you to stay silent while eating it. Practice for the chamber of stillness, she says. You ask what that is, and she just tightens her mouth and says, "You'll find out soon." Before bed, you're given a series of scrolls to copy out in perfect calligraphy. The words are all about filial piety, obedience, modesty, virtue. It's not just a handwriting test, it's a submission test. You copy each character carefully, even though your fingers cramp. Your life has shifted on its axis. You feel it in your bones, in the strange way your family looks at you now, not as their daughter, but as a diplomatic offering, a prize token, a chess piece, smiling sweetly and holding a fan. You dream of golden dragons and burning hair oil and the sound of soft footsteps behind paper walls. You wake with your heart thudding and wonder, will you be the one he chooses? And if he does, will you still be you afterward? You wake before the sun, but the palace is already moving. Servants shuffle like ghosts through the outer corridors, their footsteps muffled by rush mats. Somewhere, bells chime, small, delicate, ominous. You're summoned for what they call the initial examination, which sounds like a routine medical check but is anything but. It's held in a red-lacquered hall where you and dozens of other girls are sorted, evaluated, and, there's no gentler way to say this, visually dissected. First up, your posture. Again, you're instructed to kneel, stand, walk, and curtsy, while a trio of elderly women in embroidered robes glance at you from under drooping eyelids. One of them scribbles something when you forget to tilt your chin downward just enough, a pose meant to signal both humility and breeding. Then comes the more intimate assessment, not in a cruel way, at least not openly. But as your robes are adjusted and measured, your limbs checked for symmetry, your hairline examined for tidiness and shape, you realize something chilling. They're not looking at you. They're inventorying you, like a fine scroll or a prized breed of horse. One girl bursts into tears during the breast assessment. She's quickly removed, not rejected, just relocated. You never see her again. No one dares ask where she went. You're weighed, not in pounds, but in implications. Too thin, and you're frail. Too full-figured, and you're indulgent. They want someone precisely in the middle, like a Goldilocks fairy tale, except the bears are court ministers, and they have sharp quills instead of claws. There's a chart somewhere that ranks things like Wentinea, shape of eye, almond preferred, skin tone, fair but not sickly, voice pitch, low and soothing, ideal, teeth alignment, like pearls, the guide helpfully notes. Historians still debate whether these charts were actually used, or merely symbolic. Some argue they were meant to scare candidates into compliance, like a visual threat. Others say these evaluations were deadly serious. You, sitting on a cold bench while a stranger holds your wrist and silently checks your pulse strength, are pretty sure they're not symbolic. Once the physical is done, You're led to the family assessment chamber. This one's even more stressful. You sit while elders in gold threaded robes ask invasive questions about your family's wealth, loyalty, and, most awkwardly, reproductive history. Your answers must be modest but strategic. Your father's minor governorship must be humble enough not to threaten the emperor, but noble enough to signal good breeding. You're quizzed on literature, poetry, Confucian ethics, and how you'd respond if your husband took a concubine. The answer is always, with grace and a tight-lipped smile. There's one woman, probably in her 70s, who watches you the entire time with eyes like wet stones. She finally says, "This one has long hands. Long hands steal luck." You blink. That's it? Your fate could hinge on your knuckle length? Another girl is told her voice sounds like a reed flute. Delightful. She's glowing. Later, you overhear her whisper to her servant that she deliberately practiced every day by humming into clay jars until her tone softened. The scrutiny isn't just personal, it's generational. Your great-grandfather's wartime loyalty is examined as if he's about to walk through the door. Your mother's lack of scandal is noted. And your sister's engagement to a merchant is judged poorly. Commercial bloodlines dilute virtue, one elder sniffs. You grit your teeth. Throughout this process, you're expected to smile faintly, say only what's asked, and avoid standing out in the wrong ways. One girl quotes poetry too cleverly and is dismissed for being too sharp. Another walks too slowly and is accused of vanity. It's a high-wire act on invisible threads. Quirky detail. There's a long-standing myth that one empress of the Ming dynasty was chosen because she had double cowlicks, thought to signify mystical connection with the heavens. It's complete nonsense. But guess who's checking their hairline for cowlicks now? After what feels like days, compressed into one endless afternoon, you're herded back into the side hall. There, a eunuch with a scroll thicker than your arm reads aloud the names of those moving on to the next phase. Your stomach flips with each pause. Some girls smile quietly and step forward. Others stare, frozen. When their names aren't called, one attempts to beg. A mistake. She's removed. Again. No one knows where. When your name finally comes, second to last, you feel your knees go soft. You've passed. For now. But instead of joy, there's only a quiet pressure building in your chest. This isn't victory. It's the next round of trials. You're deeper into the labyrinth, and you suspect it only gets stranger from here. Back in your assigned quarters. Your maid whispers that the next phase includes a visit to the Chamber of Daughters. You ask what that is. She hesitates. It's where they keep the ones who've been waiting a long time. Waiting for what? For nothing, she says softly. That's the point. The next morning, you're escorted to the Palace of Hidden Daughters, and the name alone makes your skin crawl. It sounds poetic, mysterious, but also deeply, deeply wrong. The corridors that lead there grow narrower, quieter. Even the birds seem to hush as you approach. A pair of high-ranking eunuchs opens a carved gate. Beyond it lies a walled compound shaded by old trees and lined with cloisters. The air smells like magnolia petals and mothballs. It's the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like someone once laughed here and was punished for it. This is where they keep the girls who've been summoned for selection but haven't been chosen, yet, or maybe ever. You're ushered inside and introduced to a dozen young women, all of whom glance up with slow, languid eyes. Some look barely older than you. Some are well into their 20s, ancient, by bridal standards here. One sits with a pet myna bird that mimics palace gossip in a high, nasal tone. Another plucks endlessly at a zither with only 2 strings left. One woman, tall, elegant, slightly aloof, smiles and says, "Welcome to the waiting room of forgotten futures." Her name is Anne. You like her instantly. You whisper to her later, while sipping tea made with chrysanthemum and boredom. "How long have you been here?" She tilts her head. 3 years, 2 mid-autumn festivals, and 1 ghost sighting. You blink. Ghost? She laughs softly. All palaces have ghosts. Ours just walk slower. The women here were all once candidates like you, handpicked, vetted, judged, but they weren't rejected outright. That would be too decisive. Instead, they were set aside. Perhaps the emperor never saw them. Perhaps he did and shrugged. Perhaps they remind someone of someone. Perhaps they know too much. Historians still argue whether this compound served as a quiet harem annex or a glorified holding cell for political chess pieces. One theory suggests the hidden daughters were insurance, girls of noble birth kept close in case alliances shifted or the empress failed to bear an heir. Another insists it was all about optics. Rejecting high-born women could offend their families. Quietly stalling them here offended no one. You sit in the courtyard, trying to absorb it all. Here, the days pass slowly. Needlework is the dominant activity, and silence is the dominant mood. You're handed a silk panel and expected to embroider a lotus. Your stitches judged not only for beauty, but temperament. A woman who jabs her needle too harshly might, apparently, stir disharmony in the emperor's sleep. You find yourself wondering how many of these girls thought they'd marry the son of heaven, only to become invisible ornaments in a hidden wing. Each girl has her own coping ritual and recites Tang poetry backwards. Another rewrites horoscopes to give herself better luck. The youngest one makes dolls from plum pits and old silk threads. Quirky detail, one of the girls claims the emperor once did walk through their courtyard in disguise, testing their behavior. "I smiled at him," she says, "and he tripped over a rock. That was the last I saw of him." She doesn't smile anymore. You spend 3 nights in the compound. It's a dreamlike blur. The food is good. The beds are soft. But the sense of futility clings to everything. Even the moonlight feels institutional. And just when you start to think you'll be trapped here forever, a messenger arrives with a crimson scroll. Your name is on it. You've been summoned for the next phase. The other girls watch without speaking as you're led away. Anne gives you a slight nod. You know what it means. Don't forget us. Don't become us. But as you pass through the gate again and breathe the open air, you wonder if that's already too late. You don't walk into the next chamber. You enter it, like a performance. The hall of the Imperial face reader isn't built for comfort. It's long, echoing, and strangely cold despite the summer heat. Thick curtains hush your steps. Lanterns burn with salt-infused oil that smells faintly of old parchment and ginger. You've been told very little. Just this. Today, someone will decide your fate by staring at your skull. The physiognomist, as he's officially called, kneels behind a rosewood table. He wears scholar's robes dyed that specific bluish black, reserved for those who serve the inner court, but never see daylight. His fingernails are long, buffed, and yellowed. You have the uneasy sense he hasn't laughed in decades. Sit, he says without looking up. You sit. He holds a small bronze mirror in one hand and gestures for you to turn your face this way, that way. He does not touch you, but he studies you, like a monk decoding prophecy from water ripples. He starts with your forehead. High, good for wisdom. Sloped, bad for ambition. Yours is balanced, he says, which is neither good nor bad. Next, your eyes, almond-shaped, slightly downturned. Suitable for internal harmony, he murmurs, whatever that means. Your ears, set close to the head, modest, cheekbones, high, dominant. Your jawline is traced in the air with 2 fingers. He notes the cleft between purpose and patience. It sounds poetic, but you suspect it's not a compliment. Historians still argue whether face reading actually influenced selection, or whether it was a convenient excuse for decisions already made behind closed doors. One Tang Dynasty record even describes a girl with a cursed widow's brow, who was nevertheless married to an emperor because her uncle was general of the Eastern Fleet. So, there's that. But here and now, in this moment, you feel like every millimeter of your body is a loaded sentence in a book someone else is writing. The face reader makes a final note, then picks up a thin red brush. On a sheet of rice paper, he draws a simple pictograph, your elemental reading, earth over water, stability over emotion. Good for the empire, he says flatly, less so for the household. You don't know what to do with that. Thank him? Apologize? Instead, you bow. As you rise, you catch sight of something curious. Behind him, stacked neatly on a lacquered shelf, are hundreds of tiny clay busts, faces of past candidates, some chosen, most not. He sculpts them himself, they say, and gives each one a private nickname. Jade Quietude, Teacup Ambition, Too Sharp for Silk. He doesn't tell you yours. Later, you're returned to a smaller chamber and offered a cup of something warm and slightly bitter. It tastes like dates, ginseng, and crushed seed. You're told it will calm your nerves and clear your essence. You nod, because nodding is all you seem to do now. Quirky fact, one famous physiognomist in the Song court was rumored to predict not just suitability, but actual years of marriage. He once told a girl she'd be empress for exactly 13 years, and she died mysteriously 2 months after her 13th anniversary. Coincidence? The gossip certainly didn't think so. You begin to realize that the selection process isn't just about beauty or background. It's about balance, not only between families and provinces, but between elements. Fire girls might be too fierce. Water girls, too pliant. You must be just turbulent enough to keep the court interesting, but not so much as to cause scandal. And scandal, here, starts with a crooked eyebrow. Before nightfall, a messenger delivers your elemental reading to your family. Your father will be pleased. Your mother will likely burn a bundle of incense and then stress over your next hairstyle. You, meanwhile, are left wondering what happens next. Your body has been judged, your family weighed, your essence sniffed and labeled like a spice, but no one has asked what you want. You are taken, without explanation, to a domed pavilion wrapped in translucent silk screens that ripple like dragonfly wings. It is called the Chamber of Silence, though the palace whispers another name for it, the Room of Milk and Waiting. You're stripped of all ornaments. No jade hairpins, No earrings, not even embroidered shoes. You're reduced to cotton, skin, and expectation. A eunuch recites a set of rules in a flat, musical voice. No speaking, no writing, no gesturing, humming, or smiling with teeth. For 3 days, you are to remain silent. Why? No one really explains. Some say it's to cleanse the spirit. Others say it's to see whether your natural grace shines through without the distractions of flirtation or charm. One girl once whispered that it's to let the emperor hear your soul breathing, which is poetic and terrifying. You're led to a shallow stone bath already filled with cold, faintly sour-smelling goat's milk. 2 older maids help you lower yourself in, careful not to spill. Your skin prickles. You feel absurd, sacred, stupid, sacred again. Every day begins the same. You wake before dawn. You bathe in milk. You're served congee with lotus seeds. You embroider in silence. You drink bitter tea from cups with no handles. You sleep under a mosquito net that smells like sandalwood and secrets. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It stretches and curls around your thoughts like incense, smoke. You begin to imagine the voices of the other girls before you. Did they think these rituals revealed their purity? Or did they, like you, wonder if this was all performance for a man who might never even glance in your direction? Once, when you accidentally made eye contact with another girl across the courtyard, she pressed a finger lightly to her lips and mimed a wink. The gesture was so quick it could have been a blink. You smiled behind your teacup. On the second night, you dream of talking. In the dream, you recite a Tang poem, flawlessly, and the emperor appears from behind a curtain, applauding softly. When you wake, you realize you've bitten your tongue in your sleep. Historians still argue over the function of this chamber. Was it a final purification ritual rooted in Taoist quietude, or a cruel test of obedience masked as spiritual cleansing? Some say it was introduced during the Han Dynasty, when an empress claimed she could tell if a woman was pure by watching how still she remained in silence. Others say it's simply a way to keep the candidates exhausted and docile. A curious fringe belief, goat's milk, when used daily, was said to brighten the complexion and drive out fire toxins. A mystical concept of inner rage. One infamous selection tale tells of a girl who wept silently during her entire 3rd milk bath, and when asked why, after her silence ended, she replied, "I had to let the fire leave me." She became a concubine, then an empress, then a ghost story. You begin to find rhythms in the quiet. You notice the way your breath fogs the teacup before each sip. You count the flutter of the silk screens in the wind, 4 on a breeze, 3 on a still day. You embroider a crane flying away from a palace tower, and then wonder if anyone will notice the symbolism. On the final morning, a bell rings, low, and once. A maid appears and gently brushes your hair back from your face. She clips it with a single mother-of-pearl comb. You're not told whether you passed or failed, only that you're to move forward. Back in your room, your voice returns slowly. You whisper to yourself just to make sure it's still there. It is, throat dry, but yours. You've passed the test of silence. Whether it means anything, you still don't know. But the milk has dried from your skin, and your patience has been measured. You've been quiet long enough. You learn quickly that in the Imperial court, it's not just the emperor who watches, it's everyone, and no one watches more intently, more methodically, more relentlessly than the eunuchs. They are everywhere. You first notice them in the periphery, gliding like shadows in embroidered silk robes, their slippers silent on stone floors. They move in pairs, often carrying lacquered scroll cases or small bundles of medicinal herbs. You wonder how they always seem to be present when you speak. Yawn, or blink too loudly. Then you notice their notebooks. Yes, actual notebooks. Thin, bound in pale bamboo or stiff leather, filled with narrow columns of vertical characters. Each girl is given a page, sometimes two, if she's dramatic enough. You once sneezed during a calligraphy lesson and saw a eunuch's brush twitch to life. What exactly did he write? Candidate 14 prone to nasal disruption? You don't dare ask. They record everything: your eating habits, your posture, how many hairpins you wear, which poetry you recite. They seem particularly fascinated with who smiles at whom, who frowns when served bitter melon soup, who glances too long at a particular window. Your maid whispers that some eunuchs specialize in behavioral reports. Others handle medical observations. One is rumored to collect scent notes. Yes, he records how each girl smells after milk baths or incense rituals. Historians still debate how much power these eunuchs really had in choosing imperial brides. Some claim they were the emperor's eyes and ears, loyal, observant, crucial. Others argue they manipulated the selection for their own ends, favoring families that paid well or humiliated rivals they disliked. A few whispered legends tell of eunuchs who fell in love with certain candidates and ensured their elevation or their quiet disappearance. One quirky tale you hear over lotus porridge: a eunuch once disqualified a girl for laughing too loudly at a cat sneezing. He claimed it demonstrated emotional volatility unfit for state affairs. The girl later married a provincial governor and commissioned a scroll painting of cats sneezing in revenge. You try to stay neutral, smile politely, speak softly, avoid sudden movements. You pretend not to notice when one eunuch lingers just a second too long while watching you serve tea to the daughter of a general. But it gets to you. You begin to wonder how your name appears in their ledgers. Are you Candidate 17, slightly aloof but composed? Or Candidate 17, hides emotions too well, potential manipulator? You start rehearsing your expressions in the mirror: pleasant, but not eager; demure, not dull; interested, never desperate. You begin to understand the terrifying performance of imperial femininity, being exactly what they want, without ever asking what that is. And then, one evening, your maid arrives with news. Tomorrow, she says, you might be seen. Seen? You echo. The emperor, she whispers. He'll walk the garden gallery. You don't know whether to be excited or horrified. You might be examined up close, or watched from behind a screen, or simply passed by. That night, you don't sleep much. You lie awake under mosquito netting that billows with your breath, wondering how to walk like someone worth choosing. Before dawn, a eunuch arrives with fresh robes, indigo silk, embroidered with cranes in flight. Your hair is twisted into a shape meant to signal balance and harmony. You are perfumed with chrysanthemum oil and lightly dusted with pearl powder. As you are led into the garden corridor, you notice them immediately: 3 eunuchs with notebooks already open, standing like statues beside the flowering osmanthus trees. You sit with the others on silk cushions arranged beneath a trellis. You are not to speak. You are to sip tea smile when appropriate, and appear naturally radiant, whatever that means. Hours pass. No emperor. Just the eunuchs, scribbling. A girl yawns, recorded. Another tilts her head too far, recorded. You begin to feel like a character in a shadow play, performed for an invisible audience. Later, your maid whispers that the emperor did pass by, behind a screen, observing in silence. Or maybe he didn't. No one's certain. You ask, "How will I know if he saw me?" She just shrugs. "If they bring you fresh fruit tomorrow, that's usually a good sign." They don't. But they don't send you away, either. Which, in this strange game, might be the most hopeful thing of all. You awaken the next morning to the rustle of silk and the quiet knock of someone far too polite to bring bad news. Your maid enters with a small lacquered tray. No fruit, just tea. You sip it without asking what it means. You've learned by now that nothing is said directly. Everything is gesture, implication, timing. Still, the tension creeps under your skin like cold mist. By afternoon, a eunuch in sea-green robes appears at your door with another scroll. You're not dismissed. You're not chosen. You're summoned for placement viewing. You've heard of this stage. It's where high-ranking court officials, and possibly the emperor himself, make final visual selections. Not by speaking to you, no, culture. Never that directly. They watch from behind carved lattice screens or polished bronze mirrors. You act natural, as if no one is watching, while being completely aware that everyone is watching. The setting? A gallery filled with porcelain vases, bonsai trees, and strategically placed calligraphy scrolls, all designed to flatter the viewer and blur the viewed. You and 9 other candidates are positioned like living paintings. Some are told to play the gujang. Others arrange flowers. You're handed a brush and asked to paint an orchid. Your hand trembles slightly as you dip it in ink, one slow, graceful stroke at a time. You remember your mother's voice telling you that orchids are the symbol of hidden elegance. You paint the leaves longer than necessary. Maybe someone will notice. Maybe he'll see that you're trying. Historians still argue whether emperors personally attended these viewings. Some records suggest they watch from behind veiled panels, obscured by incense smoke. Others insist they sent proxies, trusted ministers or senior consorts who whispered their preferences. Either way, you feel it. The pull of invisible eyes. Halfway through your demonstration, a screen shifts, just slightly. A breeze, a deliberate move. You don't look directly, but your heartbeat stumbles. And then, fruit. Later that night, a tray of golden pears and candied hawthorn appears in your room. You stare at it for a long time before touching it. Is this it? Is this the sign? Or just someone rewarding your brushwork? Your maid beams. "They noticed you," she whispers. "That's what this means. But notice doesn't mean chosen." You're told to remain in readiness. You spend the next 3 days in a suspended state of preparation. Not celebration. Not mourning. Just waiting. Always waiting. And then, on the 4th day, the emperor appears. Well, he might appear. You're led, along with 3 other girls, to a secluded courtyard with rock gardens and a carp pond. You're told to act naturally. Sip tea. Admire the blossoms. Laugh if the mood strikes you, but not too loudly. Never too loudly. The breeze is soft. The shadows long. The garden is empty. Or is it? A rustle behind the screen. a shadow flickering across polished tiles. You feel him before you see anything, and maybe that's the point. This moment isn't about confirmation, it's about presence. You exist under his gaze, or his absence. One of the girls plays a song on the Zhao flute so beautifully it makes a servant tear up. Another recites a poem about swans returning to a lost lake. You compliment her afterward. She smiles, grateful. There's a kindness between you all now, quiet and unspoken. You're not friends, but you understand one another in ways no one else ever will. Quirky detail? Some emperors were known to wear masks or mirrored helmets during this process to remain unreadable. One Northern Wei ruler reportedly dressed as a servant during his bride selections and dropped a teacup on purpose to see which girl would rush to help him. You don't drop anything. You don't speak out of turn. You just are. When the sun finally slips behind the palace walls, a bell tolls in the distance. You're dismissed. No expression, no announcement, just a bowed head from a eunuch and a motion to follow. That night, you stare at the ceiling above your silk canopy bed and wonder, was that it? And if it was, what happens next? Morning light slips through the lattice window like a careful intruder. You barely sleep. Your maid tiptoes in, eyes wide, hands folded. There's a new scroll in her hand. She doesn't unroll it, just stares at you with a look you can't quite read. You're being evaluated for dowry suitability, she says softly. Ah, that stage. The part where the emperor stops being an idea and starts being an investment. Your breath catches. This is no longer about beauty or posture or which Tang poem you can recite upside down. This is about numbers, ledgers, value. You're summoned to the hall of gifts and contracts, a place as dull and terrifying as it sounds. It smells like dried ink, red wax, and old parchment, like a dragon's library. There, court accountants and dowry officials sit behind carved desks stacked with documents. Their job? To assess what your family can offer the empire in exchange for the honor of seeing you married to its supreme ruler. Of course, they phrase it differently. They call it harmonizing the heavens with the earth through virtuous exchange. But really, it's a glorified auction. Your father's representatives have already arrived. They bow stiffly. Behind them are scribes unrolling lists, bolts of silk, chests of jade, baskets of dried lychees, rare books, a folding screen painted by a famous recluse monk, 100 embroidered towels, one very reluctant horse. You're not allowed to speak, but you listen as they rattle off the contributions. 80 bolts of silk from the southern looms, 12 antique scrolls depicting court etiquette, 30 gin of saffron, a subtle flex, it's imported, jewelry, mostly jade, no pearls, too common, one bronze incense burner shaped like a crane, said to ward off envy, and, of course, the cash. Quietly noted in silver taels and rice equivalents, historians still debate how much the dowry actually mattered. Some say it was symbolic, used only to measure family seriousness. Others argue that for families without powerful titles or military support, it was the only bargaining chip. You remember your mother bargaining with a merchant over a pair of ivory combs last winter, she said. No emperor wants a bride whose dowry can't fill a room. You didn't understand what she meant then. Now you do. A eunuch in charge of dowry evaluation asks one of the officials a strange question. How is the scent quality of the lychees? The best, comes the reply. They've been stored with pomelo rinds. The eunuch nods solemnly. Someone writes it down. Somewhere in the records of the great empire, your future may hinge on whether your family understood proper fruit storage. Quirky fact? One Song Dynasty candidate was almost disqualified because her family sent walnuts instead of pine nuts. An insult, apparently, due to walnut oil's connotation with forgetfulness. She was saved only because her embroidery was so exquisite. The Empress Dowager intervened. Later, your maid tells you that your dowry has been deemed sufficiently distinguished. This is a good thing, but she doesn't smile. You ask, "Is this what makes the difference?" She replies, "Sometimes. You don't ask what it means when it doesn't. By nightfall, you're allowed to rest, but only briefly. Tomorrow is the robe fitting, the one where you'll be dressed like an empress. Just in case, you lie in bed staring at the ceiling again. You're not thinking about the emperor or the dowry. You're thinking about that folding screen your father sent, the one painted by the hermit monk. You used to stare at it in the study and wonder why the cranes always flew away from the mountain, never toward it. Now, you wonder if one of them is supposed to be you. You don't notice it at first, the whispers that snake through the corridors like smoke. They begin with servants, pass through the maids, and reach you in half-broken phrases, as if carried by the wind. Someone's hairpins went missing. Someone's silk robes were mysteriously stained with plum wine. Someone swears they saw a maid sprinkling powder that smelled faintly of bitter almonds into a rival's tea. This is the stage no one talks about. The rival households play their games. Each candidate has a family behind her, and each family has ambitions. You realize quickly that beauty and dowry aren't the only weapons here. There's sorcery, rumor, sabotage. One afternoon, as you prepare for the robe fitting, your maid leans close and whispers, "Don't touch any combs you didn't bring yourself." "Why?" you ask. "Peach blossom spells," she murmurs. "Brush your hair with the wrong one, and you'll lose favor before you even see him." Historians still argue whether these stories were mere gossip or real practices in the palace. There are records, half believable, half ridiculous, of charms hidden in silk linings, of unlucky jade swapped with cracked fakes, of whispered incantations over mirrors to sour a rival's reflection. A fringe tale from the Ming court claims that one candidate tied a thread soaked in mandrake oil around her rival's wrist while she slept, believing it would cause her to speak nonsense the next day. Whether true or not, the rival was dismissed for nervous babbling. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. You see signs of tension in the women around you. One girl refuses to eat anything not prepared by her family's trusted cook. Another prays so intensely at the incense altar that her fingertips turn black from ash. During your own robe fitting, the attendants whisper of a scandal. A candidate's robe was found to have hidden needles sewn into the seams, tiny enough to prick but not pierce. A eunuch blames sabotage. Another shrugs and says it's just poor stitching. The truth? No one dares ask. You stand on a low platform while seamstresses drape layers of silk around you, indigo base, gold-threaded phoenix motifs, pale white over sleeves. The robe is heavy, so heavy you think you could drown in it if you fell into the carp pond. "Hold your arms higher," one of the seamstresses snaps. "You're not a farmer lifting water buckets." You bite your tongue. The robe is meant to signal wealth, fertility, grace, all in a single, suffocating garment. It glimmers under lamplight, reflecting gold against your skin. For a moment, you see yourself in the bronze mirror and think, "I look like a statue someone forgot to bring to life." When you leave the fitting, you pass a group of candidates whispering in the courtyard. One glances your way and then looks down quickly, as though caught stealing glances at a dangerous secret. Later, you find a tiny peach blossom petal tucked under your pillow. Just one. You freeze, not knowing whether to laugh or panic. Your maid tosses it into the brazier and mutters, "Better safe than sorry." Quirky detail. There's an ancient superstition that peach blossoms could sway the heart of a man, but also curse a woman with bad fortune if misused. Court ladies used to hide petals in their sleeves during spring festivals, hoping for luck or revenge. That night, as you lie under the mosquito net, you can't shake the feeling that every smile in the palace hides a calculation. You wonder which is worse, to be sabotaged or to become someone who does the sabotaging. You decide, quietly, to survive by not playing their games. At least, that's what you tell yourself now. It is choosing day. You've lost count of how many mornings you've awoken to rituals, routines, whispers, but today, everything feels still. Even the birds outside your window seem to hold their breath. You're bathed before sunrise, not in milk, but in warm, chrysanthemum water. Your hair is oiled and combed until it gleams like polished ink. The robe you're given is heavier than anything you've worn. Imperial blue, lined in vermilion, embroidered with golden thread, in patterns of phoenixes and peonies. This isn't a fitting, this is costume, and the stage is about to open. The other candidates gather in silence. The mood is reverent and razor thin. Everyone's eyes avoid one another, except for a few daring glances, quick, evaluating, nervous. You recognize the girl with the flute, the one with the dolls, the quiet one who always eats last. You wonder if they remember your face as clearly. You're led to the hall of ceremonial selection, a space you've only heard about in court songs and overheard stories. Marble floors, pillars painted with dragons, a central aisle long enough to make your knees ache just from looking at it, and at the far end, an empty throne. He's not there. Of course. You're arranged in a half-moon formation according to status, family connections, and what your evaluation scrolls have concluded about your elemental harmony. You are placed just off-center, close enough to matter, far enough to be uncertain. Then begins the waiting. Time passes in gestures. A eunuch steps forward and reads aloud ceremonial blessings from a jade scroll. Another sprinkles powder into a brazier, sandalwood, orange peel, something floral. A third announces the arrival of the inner court officials. Still, no emperor. And then, a sound, soft but decisive. Footsteps. He doesn't enter with grandeur, no procession, no fanfare, just quiet authority, cloaked in silence. He walks with two advisors at his side and a pale gold sash slung across his shoulder. His face is unreadable, youngish, clean-shaven, tired eyes. He doesn't look at you. Not yet. One by one, you're asked to step forward, bow, and recite a single line of verse. You chose yours carefully last night. Something classical, gentle, not too clever. A line about the moon, not the heart. When your turn comes, you step lightly onto the silk runner and bow, low, arms and sleeves, fingers hidden. Your voice is calm, even. Not because you aren't scared, because you've passed fear and reached the other side. He doesn't react, and still, somehow, you feel seen. After everyone has spoken, the emperor leans to one of his advisors. They speak in whispers you cannot hear. A eunuch steps forward, unrolls a scroll, and reads a name. Not yours. The chosen girl steps forward, trembling, her face straining to maintain serenity. She kneels. A sash is placed over her shoulder. There it is. You are not the chosen bride, but you are not dismissed either. In the Imperial court, not chosen doesn't mean freedom. You are led to the side, along with 5 others. A different eunuch approaches. This one, older, gentler. You will remain in the palace, he says. You have been honored. You bow, not out of obedience, but because your knees might give way otherwise. Later, in your new chamber, larger, quieter, not quite yours, you sit with your hands in your lap and try to understand how you feel. Relieved? No. Devastated? Not exactly. Changed? Completely. Quirky tradition? In some dynasties, the not-quite brides were assigned to the Hall of Refined Companions, semi-retired from selection, but retained as ceremonial ladies. Sometimes, one of them would rise years later to unexpected power through quiet alliance or an emperor's whim. You stare out the lattice window and think, maybe your story isn't over. Maybe it's just paused. Or maybe this was always your place, close enough to power to feel its warmth, but never quite burned. The day after choosing, the palace does not return to normal. Because normal, you now realize, is a fiction. You weren't chosen to be empress, but you also weren't sent home. You, like several others, now belong to a quiet category. Those who remain. You are not a bride. You are not a guest. You are not a prisoner. Exactly. You are a lady in waiting. Your quarters change. Larger, better furnished, but windowless. Symbolic. You suspect. No need to look outward anymore. Your world is now inward. Mirrors. Rules. Ceremonies. Whispers. The morning begins with a new schedule written in waterbrush on silk. Wake at the 3rd chime. Assist with ceremonial dressings. Attend poetry reading, observe only. Tea rotation and garden of contemplation. Evening embroidery. Dragon patterns only. No mention of you. Just your duties. Your maid, assigned to you, not chosen, now refers to you as Lady of the Moon Gallery. A polite way of saying, still here, not quite anything. Body. And yet, the court is filled with such women, ghosts who smile, glide, pour tea with perfect wrist angles. Some were candidates. Others are daughters of allies or distant cousins of someone important. You are seated near one such woman during your first tea rotation. She's older than you by 10 years, maybe 15. Dressed in faded silks with flawless poise. Her name is Malin. She speaks only once. The ones who talk the least last the longest. You take her advice to heart. Historians still argue about the exact role of ladies-in-waiting in the inner court. Some say they were nothing more than decoration, glorified furniture with etiquette training. Others insist they were essential players in palace diplomacy, quiet messengers, emotional barometers, keepers of private knowledge. You suspect it's both. Quirky fact? During the Tang Dynasty, one lady-in-waiting kept a secret journal hidden in the lining of her sleeve, where she documented every time an official tried to bribe her for gossip. It was discovered after her death and used as evidence in 3 trials. You don't write anything down. You memorize everything. You begin to notice the Empress more. Now that she's crowned, she moves with the weight of expectation. She smiles too rarely. Her eyes scan too quickly. Once, during a morning ritual, she drops her hairpin. You kneel to retrieve it before anyone else moves. She doesn't thank you, but you catch a flicker of acknowledgement. That night, your maid tells you. That was seen? Everything is seen. There are moments of beauty. 2. You watch carp swirl in jade-colored ponds. You learn which flowers bloom best in winter. You embroider dragons that seem to wink when the silk catches light. You laugh once, genuinely, when a parrot mimics the Imperial librarian's snore. And yet, your status is liminal. You're respected, but not heard. Present, but unchosen. You have power only in the shadows of the throne. And perhaps the strangest part, you start to enjoy the quiet. You become excellent at pouring tea. You learn the difference between real gossip and baited rumors. You know which eunuchs can be trusted with secrets, and which ones collect them like porcelain figurines. Your name fades from the ledgers, but your presence lingers. And sometimes, when the emperor passes by on his slow walks through the plum courtyard, he looks at you just a little too long. Or maybe you imagine it. Does it matter? You are still here. They dress you now without asking. A rustling of silk, a quiet command, and suddenly your sleeves are longer, your hair wound higher, your waist cinched tighter. You have not been promoted. You have not been chosen. But something has changed. You've been noticed. You hear it first from Melan, in her usual nonchalant murmur while folding peony-shaped napkins. You're in the rotation now. You blink. The rotation? She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. Every emperor, even the kind ones, even the distracted ones, even the ones pretending at monogamy, has his rotation, a polite term for the list of women he may call for tea, music, chess, or what follows. The empress reigns. But concubines populate. You're not officially one yet, but you're now in proximity. The next day, you're assigned a new robe, cinnabar red, with gold embroidery shaped like paired mandarin ducks, symbols of eternal union. The symbolism does not go unnoticed. You serve tea to the imperial physician. You accompany the empress's cousin on a garden stroll, and eventually, you are asked to assist with ceremonial incense during the evening Four Virtues recitation. You stand just behind the empress. The emperor enters silently. You don't dare look directly, but from the edge of your vision you can feel him, a quiet presence, large but tired. When the empress recites the lines from classic of filial piety, her voice catches a perfect moment. He glances sideways, at her, at you, at the flame dancing on the incense stick. That night, you are moved to better quarters. Fresh fruit arrives again, this time with candied ginger. The court does not explain. The court implies. Historians still argue whether such ascents were strategic or accidental. Did the emperor choose women like pulling a tile from a game set? Or was it always the court, his mother, his advisors, the eunuchs, nudging, guiding, selecting for him? One record describes a song emperor who allegedly selected concubines by dream, claiming visions led him to their chambers. Scholars suspect his chief eunuch was behind the dreams. You think about that as you are summoned, not to the emperor's private rooms, but to the chamber of discipline and delight. It's less sinister than it sounds, Orizace. It's a place where new court favorites are softly reshaped, trained in imperial etiquette, refined dialects, strategic silence. You are taught to speak without finishing your thoughts, to fold notes 3 times, never 4, to serve wine at precisely the angle that suggests both humility and intimacy. You are told, you are not a threat, but you must never be forgettable. One quirky anecdote they teach with a straight face. When entering a room, do not step fully through the threshold. Pause, look downward, allow curiosity to build behind you. Like you're a theatrical reveal, you practice this 3 times a day. Then you are given your own maid, no longer the one who's been with you since you arrived. This one is from the Interior Whisper Chamber, a title that tells you everything and nothing. She says nothing when she dresses you, but when she fastens the final sash, she says, "He's heard your name." You try not to react. That evening, you are invited to perform a poem for the spring lantern ceremony. It's not a direct summons, but it's a summons all the same. Your name is read slowly by a eunuch. You walk out into a courtyard filled with gold light and long shadows. You recite Li Qing Jiao, of course, a woman's voice, a melancholy one. When you finish, the emperor claps once, and that is all. You walk away changed, not elevated, but proximate, close enough to see the crown without touching it, and maybe, just maybe, close enough for it to eventually touch you. They don't tell you directly. Of course not. Nothing in the imperial court is said plainly, not when implication can do the job just as well. You receive a bowl of pear soup at breakfast, steamed gently, scented with osmanthus. There is no accompanying note, but your maid nods and says, "The dowager recommended this." You know what that means. You're under surveillance again, but this time it's not about your calligraphy, your composure, or your embroidery. It's about your womb. You are now being watched not as a candidate or a concubine in waiting, but as a potential vessel. Everyone is suddenly interested in your health. A court physician comes to check your pulse. You are asked about your dreams, your appetite, the regularity of your cycles. A eunuch places a tiny string between your fingers and announces that your elemental balance is acceptable for gestation. You nod politely, Jarozom, even though you want to scream. Historians often glide past this part when recounting imperial women's lives. The marriage, the rise, the politics, these are public and dramatic. But behind the curtain is a quiet, consuming truth. You exist to bear heirs, not children, heirs. There is a different your daily routine shifts again. You are given warm foods, no more icy fruit. You are told not to read too late at night. It tensions the eyes and harms internal stillness. You are told to avoid loud sounds and overly emotional stories. You are gently discouraged from climbing stairs. You haven't even been called to his chambers yet, and still, the womb watchers circle. You walk through the plum pavilion and feel their eyes. The empress, serene and cold. The junior consorts, fanning themselves too slowly. Even the gardeners seem to pause, watching for any sign that your skin is glowing more than yesterday. Malin finds you one evening, sitting alone beneath a silk lantern. She lowers herself beside you with that peculiar grace only long-suffering women seem to possess. "It begins now," she says. "What does?" you ask. "The waiting," she replies. "The hoping, the pretending not to hope, the watching of yourself, and others watching you, and all of you pretending none of it matters." You don't answer. You just sip the soup that's been gently warmed in porcelain bowls shaped like baby birds. Quirky fact? One Qing dynasty concubine was rumored to eat 5 boiled quail eggs every morning because a monk once told her it increased fruitfulness. She never conceived, but she lived to 90. The eggs probably helped. One morning, your maid lays out a robe embroidered with lotus buds, unbloomed. You realize it's a statement. You're not pregnant, but you are pre-pregnant, which is, in this court, nearly as political. Even your body feels unsure of itself now. You begin to analyze your own breath, your own dreams. One night, you dream of cranes, 3 of them, circling overhead. You tell your maid. She claps excitedly. A sign, is it? Or are you just being swept into the dream of everyone else? Historians still debate whether this pressure genuinely increased birth rates in the palace, or merely made women sick with nerves. Some accounts describe quiet miscarriages, followed by sudden falls from favor. Others note that women without children often lived longer, because they weren't caught in the dangerous game of succession. You begin to understand something new. The moment you are chosen, touched, impregnated, you are no longer a person. You are a dynastic project. And if something goes wrong, if the child is lost, or born the wrong gender, or too early, you will be blamed. Your body is no longer yours. It belongs to the Imperial legacy. You stare at your reflection that night, clear skin, steady eyes, nothing visibly different, and wonder how long it will be before someone writes a report on the state of your hips. You wonder if anyone still sees you as a woman, or just a hopeful cradle. You are summoned to serve tea in the Hall of Harmonious Winds, a simple enough task, but you know what it means. That hall is where they gather, the other women, the ones the emperor already visits, the concubines. They are not what you expected. You thought they would be catty, ruthless, decorated weapons with hair like swords, and yes, some are like that, but others are soft-spoken, poised, even kind, which, in its own way, is more terrifying. You pour tea with a steady hand. They do not greet you, but they do notice you. One of them, a woman in crimson robes with a beauty mark below her eye, gazes at you for a moment too long. Then she smiles, delicately. We heard you embroidered a crane last week. Very refined. You nod. Thank you. The game has begun. You are now on the edge of their circle, not yet inside, but no longer invisible, and that is the most dangerous place to be. Later that week, you're invited to observe a poetry reading with the emperor present. You are seated in the 3rd row, behind the junior consorts and far behind the empress. You are not meant to speak. You are meant to be seen, but subtly, a ribbon fluttering just right, a glance timed with a poetic sigh. The emperor does not look at you, except once, briefly, a glance that could be accidental or loaded. You replay it for hours afterward like a song with a single clear note. Historians still argue whether concubine rankings were determined by merit, beauty, or sheer family influence. Some say charm could raise you. Others say it was all timing. One Qing emperor was reportedly so smitten with a concubine because she laughed at his joke before he finished it. A historian later called her the most intelligent woman to ever pretend to be foolish. You begin to learn their patterns. The favorites wear color more boldly. They walk slowly, never rush. They speak as if their words are being recorded, because they are. You, on the other hand, wear muted pastels and stay a half step behind everyone else, but you observe everything. You learn who sits closest to the emperor during calligraphy exhibitions, who delivers him chilled plum wine in summer, who plays music, who sings, Who paints? You don't do any of these things, not yet, but you learn who does them best. Quirky observation? One older concubine trains her parrot to mimic court poetry every time she walks past the emperor's courtyard. The bird chants, "Spring moon rising above gentle waves." It is charming and unsettling. You try not to think about it too much, about whether the emperor will choose you next, or ever, about whether being chosen will make you a target or just visible. But in the weeks that follow, your place becomes clear. You are not ignored. You are not invited. You are watched. One evening, you are asked to recite a poem in the Hall of Literary Blossoms. Just a small gathering, mostly women, a few ministers' wives. But when you finish your final line, the river flows, but forgets no pebble. Someone claps from behind the screen, just once, softly. You know who it is. The next morning, there is a single white camellia placed beside your breakfast tray. No note, no explanation. In this palace, that's as clear as thunder. You do not smile. You simply finish your pear soup, slowly, because now the concubines are watching you. You're awake before the bell, not because anyone roused you, because you dreamt of falling, a long drop through silk curtains and hollow laughter, and a hand you reached for that never quite took yours. It's the kind of dream you don't mention aloud, especially not here. Your days now orbit the Imperial household with more gravity. You're not yet official, not yet named or titled, but you've entered the invisible court, the one where alliances are whispered, not written, where survival hinges not on obedience, but on performance. And that means it's time to learn the true language of the palace. Etiquette, not the kind your mother taught you, not the polite bow or the way to serve soup clockwise. This is a different beast entirely. This is the art of saying everything while appearing to say nothing. Your first lesson comes in the form of a summons, an invitation to attend the Empress's tea circle. An honor, a trap, possibly both. The Empress sits at the head of the room beneath a painting of orchids in snow. Her expression is perfect, serene, empty. Beside her, the concubines fan themselves languidly, all pretending not to measure one another's smiles. You are seated last, the newest, the quietest, the most observed. She offers you tea herself, a jasmine blend, unusually bitter. You accept it with both hands and bow at just the right angle, not too low, that would make you appear insecure, not too high, that would seem defiant. Do you enjoy poetry? She asks, casually. Yes, Your Majesty. You reply, though I am still learning the depths of the court style. A safe answer. Not too clever. Humble. You feel a flicker of warmth until one of the concubines giggles and says, perhaps she prefers the mountain poems, simple verses for simpler hearts. The Empress does not laugh. She sips. You do not rise to the bait. You simply tilt your head and respond. Even a mountain flower bends toward the capital sun. A silence. Then another sip. Then, finally, the Empress smiles. You've passed the first test. Historians still debate the role of etiquette in inner court dynamics. Was it truly a weapon, or just a social constraint? Some records suggest women rose in status not because they bore sons, but because they knew how to navigate silken warfare. One Tang consort was said to have never raised her voice above a whisper, and yet drove her rivals into exile through nothing but graceful pauses. That night, Your maid teaches you how to flutter a fan as if uncertain, just enough to look vulnerable, not indecisive. She teaches you how to cry, silently, with the corners of your eyes, how to arrange your hair to suggest melancholy without appearing unwell. You begin practicing bows in the mirror, one for the empress, one for her mother, one for the concubine who once tripped you by accident. You memorize your walking radius, no more than 7 steps behind the empress, never to her right, always to her left during festival ceremonies. You practice how to smile just wide enough to show serenity, but never enough to show teeth. A quirky rule: when speaking to a superior, you must always begin your sentence with a compliment, even if you're answering a question about your health. So when asked, "Are you well?" you respond, "Only under your grace's benevolent stars." You feel like a well-trained bird, plucking phrases from thin air, but it works. One afternoon, as you pour tea for the chief attendant of rites, he leans in and whispers, "You are learning quickly." He doesn't mean the tea. And this is the new battlefield. In the war of nods and glances and compliments that slice like silk blades, you survive it by remembering Malin's first advice: say little, see much. And so, you walk slower, you speak softer, you sharpen your silence until it gleams. And when the Empress passes you in the corridor and does not correct your bow, you feel it. You're not just surviving, you're ascending. They say the stars decide everything: the timing of your birth, the shape of your future, whether your wedding day will bring fortune or disaster, or both. In the palace, no decision escapes the heavens. When you're summoned again, this time with formality, red ink on cream parchment, you know what it means. A night has been selected, a night of auspicious alignment. The astrologers have been watching the sky. Mercury is no longer retrograde. Venus, they claim, casts a favorable light for first touch. It sounds poetic until you remember what it means. The Emperor is choosing a night to be with you. You are bathed in sandalwood-infused water, your hair dried with silk cloths and perfumed with osmanthus oil. You are forbidden garlic, forbidden onion. You are given a cup of sweet wine to steady your hands, and a charm, yes, a real charm, thin silk inscribed with gold characters: joy, harmony, sun. You're meant to sleep with it beneath your pillow. Quirky tradition: during the Tang Dynasty, brides were known to eat 1 pickled plum, 1 spoon of honey, and 1 red date before bed on their wedding night to sweeten their fate. You are given the same tray. The symbolism is not lost on you, and still somehow, the scholars argue, was this all real belief? Or polite theater? Did the stars hold power? Or were they convenient scapegoats for the unpredictable whims of men in golden hats? You're not here to debate philosophy. You're here to walk quietly through an incense-thick corridor toward a chamber lit only by lanterns and watched by no one, yet judged by everyone. The Empress does not speak to you that day, but her silence is deliberate. The concubines, too, keep their distance. You are being tested again, only now. The stakes are higher, the chamber is quiet, the air warm. The Emperor sits behind a screen, still clothed, reading. His hair is tied with a gold-threaded cord. You do not know where to look, so you look at the floor. He speaks first. Do you remember the poem you recited? You nod. He repeats your line: "The river flows, but forgets no pebble." Then he chuckles, gently. A strange metaphor for memory, don't you think? You answer without thinking, or perhaps for regret. He looks at you. this time without veil or ceremony. You notice the sadness in his face, not dramatic sadness, a quiet erosion, the kind that happens slowly in people who can never speak freely. I chose tonight, he says, but not because the stars said so. You don't ask why. You just listen. Later. The courtiers will record this night as blessed. They'll note the moon phase, the favorable winds, the 9 cranes that passed overhead that morning. They'll say it was fate, but in that moment, when he lifts your hand with deliberate care, you realize it wasn't the stars. It was a decision. His, yours, both. The next morning, you are not paraded. There is no announcement. But there is a bowl of bird's nest soup on your tray, and a cluster of red peonies placed carefully at your door. You are told to rest. You are told, delicately, to eat well. You are now someone different, not wife, not empress, not yet consort, but seen, and, in this palace, that is everything. There's a new stillness around you now, not peace, perimeter. Servants lower their voices when you pass. Eunuchs take notes in shorter strokes, glancing up less often. Even Melan, who once warned you not to trust kindness in the palace, offers you a bowl of chrysanthemum tea without commentary. You've been marked, not with a title, not officially, but with something subtler, heavier, attention, and attention, in the palace, is a currency and a curse. You begin to hear the names of women who came before you, not in praise, in warning. Lady Zhao, whose laughter charmed a prince but earned her exile when the empress discovered she'd gifted the same joke twice. Consort Mei, who bore a child, lost it, and then faded into obscurity because she wept too much. Lady Lin, remembered not for her talent in dance or song, but for the 2 characters she once miswrote on an imperial greeting. You realize quickly that being chosen is not the climax of a story. It is the beginning of a new danger. Your body is now watched again, but differently. Your appetite is noted. The temperature of your bath water is recorded. You're given soft cotton pillows embroidered with symbols of fertility, grapes, pomegranates, rabbits with too many children to count, and every morning, a quiet shuffle outside your door as a court physician leaves a note in sealed silk paper. You're not allowed to read it, but you know, it's your temperature, your pulse, your womb's whisper. Historians still argue about how much power an imperial woman held once favored. Some say she became a political actor overnight. Others insist her power was illusion, dependent on whether her belly swelled or stayed flat. You watch your reflection and ask it daily, am I changing? Am I being rewritten? One afternoon, the Empress speaks to you for the first time in weeks. She does not raise her voice. She simply places a pale white fan on the table between you. Take it, she says. You do. It is a gift, a warning, maybe both. The fan is decorated with butterflies, fragile, beautiful, short-lived. You should rest more, she adds. Rest is important when spring enters the garden. It's not spring, it's mid-autumn, and yet, you understand. That night, a physician comes with a new herbal tincture. You're told it's to ease the path. You drink it in silence. The palace now begins to behave as if a child already stirs within you. Servants pat your seat with an extra cushion before you sit. The food is softer, less seasoned. A red string is tied around your wrist one morning, without explanation. You don't ask. Quirky belief? During the Ming Dynasty, It was thought that wearing coral beads during early pregnancy protected the unborn from nightmares. Another claimed that the sound of the guqin could help guide a male fetus into an upright disposition. You're given both. You haven't bled in 2 weeks, but no one has spoken the word aloud. Not yet. And yet, somewhere, deep in the shadowed halls of the Forbidden City, your name is now inked in a side ledger. Next to it, a tentative mark, a seed. No one will say it, but they're all waiting. You are now not just a woman, you are potential lineage. There's a storm coming. Not outside. The sky is clear. The chrysanthemums blooming in military precision. No, the storm is inside the palace walls. You feel it in the shift of the servants' steps, in the way the eunuchs stop asking polite questions and start observing, in how the concubines smile wider, but only with their mouths, because now the rumors are out. You might be pregnant. You haven't confirmed it. Not officially. No one has. But that doesn't matter. Scent of possibility is stronger than incense. And in a palace where bloodlines are destiny, your quiet body has become the battlefield. The Empress says nothing, which says everything. She begins to keep you closer. Request your presence during her embroidery sessions. Asks for your opinion on flower arrangements. One morning, she hands you a piece of pale silk and says, "Would you embroider a magnolia for me? White thread, no outline." You nod. You understand. Magnolia, dignity, white, danger. No outline, invisible boundaries. Historians argue endlessly over the role of pregnant consorts in palace politics. Some claim they gained real power, their families elevated, their opinions sought. Others insist they were sheltered only until they gave birth, after which they became ghosts with titles. One chilling entry from the Song Court describes a favored consort who spoke boldly during her pregnancy, then was never heard from again. You try to speak very little. Still, it's impossible not to be seen. The other concubines begin to hover. One offers you plum candy, sweet and oddly sticky. Another compliments your skin and insists you try her herbal tonics. You thank her. You never drink them. You begin to understand why some women chose silence not out of obedience, but strategy. You also begin to dream more vividly of stairwells, of slipping, of wine cups tipped just a little too easily. You wake one night to find a loose tile under your bed cushion, unremarkable to anyone else, but slightly sharp. You say nothing, but your maid says everything with her eyes when she sees it. From that day on, she tastes everything before you do. Quirky tale? A Qing. Dynasty? Consort? Once carried a jade beetle in her sleeve during the first trimester for protection. Another smeared ground pearl on her cheeks to signal good fortune. You're gifted both. You keep them in a box you never open. And yet, through all the tension, the court remains a machine. Rituals continue. Officials bow. Courtyards are swept twice daily. You are summoned to participate in a mid-autumn ceremony, a role traditionally reserved for high-ranking women. You kneel beside the Empress and pour tea for visiting ministers' wives. Your sleeve brushes hers. She does not move. When she speaks, it is in the middle of a poem. Some flowers bloom only to fall. You nod. But some fall in order to bloom again. She turns her head just slightly, not anger, not affection, but calculation. You have just made your move, and somewhere, far beyond your chamber walls, Someone is deciding whether you're a piece to keep on the board or to quietly remove. The quiet has teeth now, not the soft silence of silk slippers or incense smoke. This silence waits. It hovers. It decides. Your body is no longer private. It's a subject of court discussion, even if your name is never spoken aloud. You are referred to in euphemisms. The orchid blooming out of season. The lady of the ninth door. The one with the shadow beneath her waist. Your belly has not yet rounded, but your fate has, and there are choices to make, none of them really yours. Some women, upon becoming pregnant, retreat. They grow quiet, safe, shadowy. Others ascend, publicly, defiantly, cloaked in new robes and reinforced with alliances. You must decide which path to follow, or pretend to decide, while someone else has already chosen for you. You try retreat. For a while, you speak only when spoken to. You walk only when summoned. You pretend not to notice when one of the concubines brushes your sleeve too closely in the corridor. But retreat, it turns out, is not the same as safety. Whispers reach you of others who once carried the emperor's child. Some delivered healthy sons, only to see them raised by someone else, usually the empress. Others gave birth alone, in distant wings of the palace, with no title, no acknowledgement, no protection. And still others disappeared. Historians debate whether these vanishings were political, medical, or fictional. But the pattern is clear. Not all mothers live to be remembered, so you just say, yo, kaftini, and you stop shrinking. You begin to reappear carefully. You offer quiet observations during tea. You volunteer to recite poetry again, soft, short, unthreatening verses about mist and pine trees. You start wearing green instead of gray, a hopeful color, a planting color. And then, one morning, a scroll arrives. A promotion, not to empress, not even to consort, but a minor title. Gentle attendant of the ninth chamber. It's ceremonial, almost meaningless, except it's official. It means the emperor acknowledges you, that you now rank, albeit lowly, within the court, that harming you would now require paperwork. Malin brings the news with a strange smile. You're on the board now, she says. Let's hope you don't get knocked off it. That evening, a low-ranking concubine named Lianhua brushes past you and drops her fan. You stoop to pick it up. She whispers, "Do not sit under windows during thunder." You return the fan and bow. You sleep in the center of your bed now, not near the edge. You let your maid braid red threads into the sleeves of your robe, old charms against envy. You chew 3 goji berries every morning and pretend it's for the taste. One night, you light a candle and let the wax drip in a circle. You don't say any spells. You just watch the way the flame trembles when you exhale. Quirky superstition. In the Tang court, it was believed that if a woman dreaming of wolves birthed a daughter, the girl would become a queen. You dream of wolves often, but also of gates, locks, and the sound of water where there should be none. You wonder if the Empress dreams of you, and you wonder what she dreams for you, because now the choices ahead are fewer. Deliver the child. Hope it's a boy. Hope the Empress doesn't raise him as her own. Deliver the child. Hope it's a girl. Hope she's beautiful and clever and quiet. Lose the child. Through accident, medicine, or design. Or, option 4, become powerful enough that none of those outcomes destroy you. The day begins with cranes overhead, 3 of them, white, slow, graceful, their wings cut across the sunrise like brushstrokes on a scroll too ancient to read. The palace stirs beneath them, unaware or pretending. Your hand rests gently over your belly now, not out of instinct, but ritual. The movements of your body are no longer yours. Each step, each breath, each bite of rice cake is interpreted, discussed, judged, but something inside you has shifted. You are no longer surviving this palace. You are navigating it, quietly, strategically. You've made it past the fire, and yet, there are embers. Today, you sit for your portrait, a small painting, commissioned by the Office of Internal Harmony, not for public display, not yet, but they're cataloging you now. You wear your title robe, subdued green, silver edging. Your hair is pulled back, but not tightly. Your hands folded just below your chest, fingers interlocked like a closed gate. The artist doesn't speak to you, but he watches carefully. His brush trembles on the outline of your jaw. You wonder what name he'll give the painting. Something like Attendant in Early Spring or Harmony Before Storm. You stare ahead as he paints, unmoving, but your thoughts wander. You remember the girl who embroidered the crane, the one who stood in line during the first posture exam, the one who soaked in goat's milk and said nothing for 3 days. She is still here, but her silence is full now. And yet, you can't help but wonder, what will they say of you years from now? Will historians find your name in a scroll? Will they argue over whether you were clever or just lucky? Whether your child, if you bear one, rose or vanished? Will they say you were loved? Will they care? Perhaps they'll see the painting. Perhaps they'll trace the line of your face with a scholar's indifference and label you minor figure. Or perhaps, one day, a new empress will stand beneath your portrait and whisper, "She knew what she was doing." Wind rustles the edge of the scroll. The artist packs his inks. The day ends like any other. You walk back to your chambers slowly, not because you are tired, though you are, but because you want to remember how it feels to walk without fear. Tonight, you will sleep with the windows open. You will light a single lamp. You will write a letter you never send. And you will close your eyes knowing this. You were seen. You endured. You chose. Even in a world where choosing seemed impossible. The candles burn low now, casting soft shadows along the corridor walls. The palace grows quieter, wrapped in stillness deeper than sleep. Outside, the wind dances through the plum blossoms, loosening a petal here, a memory there. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings once, low, slow, and fading. You lie back beneath a silk canopy, the embroidered dragons above you worn with time and secrets. The air is cool against your skin, the silence rich with breath and unspoken names. You've seen the faces behind the fans. You've heard the meanings between the words. You've survived glances sharper than knives, and kindnesses heavy as chains. But for now, none of that matters. The titles, the robes, the rivals, the roles, they can wait. Your heart beats gently beneath your hand. The room sways in stillness. You are not a painting. You are not a legend. You are not even a name whispered in court. You are simply here, breathing, resting, safe for this moment. Let the halls echo behind you. Let the stars rearrange themselves above. Let the dreams come softly, without edges. Because tonight, you are not anyone's bride, not anyone's plan. You are the stillness after the last footstep. the warmth left in a teacup, the hush between breaths, and you are enough. Sleep well, my dear listener. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.